The US housing market is skyrocketing, except in a few hidden corners where a full-size house costs less than a used car. No gimmicks, no haunted basements, well, maybe a ghost or two with personality. Picture quiet streets where porches sag, but neighbors still wave, where kids ride bikes past abandoned factories, and the smell of fresh paint mingles with the faint scent of nostalgia. Some houses sit by glimmering lakes, others behind rusty fences, each with a story Zillow will never tell you, and these towns are the kind of places that make you second-guess everything you thought you knew about affordable living. The local diner remembers your name, the stoplights have a personality of their own, and a two-story home with a backyard big enough for a barbecue costs less than your monthly coffee habit. Sure, some corners come with quirks, like the occasional pothole that could double as a swimming pool or summers that feel like the sun is holding a grudge. But the price makes up for it. For anyone tired of doom-scrolling endless listings, these towns are proof that the American dream isn't dead. It just moved somewhere quieter, cheaper, and way more interesting. By the end of this list, you might even be packing boxes. Harlingen, Texas. In Harlingen, you can land a full 3-bedroom for less than a cramped Tulsa studio, and the sun doesn't just shine, it attacks. This is South Texas living where the cost of entry feels borderline illegal. Numbers. Median home price hovers around $136,000, rent often under $1,000. And Texas sweetens the deal with no state income tax. Your mortgage is smaller than most people's car payment. Catch. Affordability comes with trade-offs. Crime runs higher than average, especially theft and car break-ins, the job market is limited, and your air conditioner isn't just an appliance, it's practically a family heirloom. Local quote. Harlingen is 1998 with palm trees, a Redditor quipped. And yeah, Blockbuster's still closed. Running gag. Drivers. Turn signals? Pure mythology. Someone blinks left, then goes straight. No one even flinches. Picture this. The morning air smells like fresh breakfast tacos. A rogue shopping cart cruises across the H-E-B parking lot. Neighbors wave from their driveways in worn slippers. You feel rich until you check twice that your car still has mirrors. Living for less than your Tulsa studio, taco me in or hard pass. And if Harlingen's heat feels spicy, Mission turns it up with bonus mosquitoes. Mission, Texas. Mission is where you can still grab a house under $100,000 that feels like time travel. Only this version comes with SPF 50. If you've ever dreamed of paying less for a mortgage than for your phone bill, this is the spot. Numbers. The median home price is around $98,000. Rent for a 2-bedroom runs close to $750, and the overall cost of living is about 24% below the national average. The math alone makes your wallet sigh in relief. Catch. Summers routinely blast past the triple digits. Job opportunities lean heavily on healthcare and agriculture, and the nightlife usually shuts down by 10 p.m., unless you count the action at the H-E-B parking lot. Local quote. Living in Mission is like being in a taco commercial with a heat warning, one local joked. Running gag. Drivers. On these streets, there are only 2 speeds, Grandpa Cruise or Fast and Furious Border Edition. Picture this. Golden sun pouring over palm trees, faint mariachi music carried on the breeze, the smell of fajitas sizzling somewhere nearby. You're sweating through your 3rd shirt of the day, but your mortgage is laughing at you. 100 degrees Fahrenheit for $100,000. I'm in, or I'll stay cool? And if Mission feels too hot, Eagle Pass throws in border views with no shade. Eagle Pass, Texas. Here, you can buy a house for under $90,000 and look straight across the Rio Grande at Mexico. Not Netflix, the real thing. Eagle Pass is one of those border towns where the price tags make you question reality. Numbers. The median home price floats near $89,000. Rents often land between $650 to $750, and the cost of living is about 23% below the US average. The math checks out. It's affordable. Catch. Summers turn every car into an oven, nearly every conversation circles back to the border, and outsiders often assume it's more dangerous than it really is. Truth is, locals will tell you it's safer than your aunt's Facebook feed suggests. Local quote. The biggest threat here is sunburn, one resident laughed. Running gag. Infra. Leave your phone on the dashboard, and it'll be 350 degrees Fahrenheit in 10 minutes flat. Picture this. Breakfast tacos wrapped in foil, cumbia music drifting over fences, and a warm Rio Grande breeze rolling through. Life feels peaceful, colorful, and cheap, until the neighbor's Dodge Charger rips donuts in the Whataburger parking lot at 2 a.m. Living on the border for under $90,000, but si por favor, or nah, I'd rather freeze. Next stop, Springfield mixes Lincoln with Siren Karaoke, Springfield, Illinois. In Springfield, you can snag a house for just over $100,000, visit Abraham Lincoln's tomb on a Tuesday, and still deal with mini metropolis chaos by Friday. It's the capital of Illinois, but the real draw is that you can buy a whole home for the cost of a Chicago parking spot. Numbers. The median home price hovers near $108,000, average rent is under $850, and the cost of living runs about 20% lower than the national average. On paper, it's a bargain. Catch. Violent crime rates are roughly double the US average. Property crime isn't shy either, and streets sometimes close for protests, festivals, or just a hot dog stand deciding it owns the block. Local quote. Springfield, Lincoln, laws, and lock your doors, one resident summed up. Running gag. Weather. The app might say mild spring, but your body says sauna wrapped in soggy newspaper. Picture this. The smell of BBQ drifting past old Victorian homes, a guy in cargo shorts in the middle of February, kids biking past squeaky screen doors, and sirens rehearsing like it's their side hustle, living between Abe and administration, honest in or hard pass. If that feels rough, Decatur adds its own soy-scented chaos. Decatur, Illinois. In Decatur, a 3-bedroom can cost under $90,000, leaving you enough leftover for groceries, gas, and maybe a year of sweet tea, if you don't mind the smell. Affordability is the main headline here, but it comes with quirks you'll smell before you see. Numbers. The median home price sits around $93,000, average rent falls below $800, and the cost of living runs a hefty 26% under the national average. Dollar for dollar, it's one of Illinois' cheapest hometowns. Catch. Violent crime runs about 54% higher than the US average. Jobs mostly orbit agriculture and manufacturing, and the entire city is basically scented by ADM. Locals don't call it an industrial perfume for nothing. Close your windows when the wind shifts. Local quote. Affordable, but close your windows when ADM's cooking, a resident warned. Running gag. Drivers. Stop signs are suggestions. One hand holds coffee, the other a chicken biscuit, and somehow they're still steering through the intersection. Picture this. Steam rising off factory stacks at sunrise, corn syrup in the air, a plastic trash bin tumbling across the street in a Midwestern gust. It's cozy, stubborn, and affordable, if your nose can handle the soy broth. Next up, Weirton trades the smell for straight-up nostalgia. Weirton, West Virginia. Weirton feels like a time capsule where steel mills shaped the skyline and neighbors still wave from porches. The big hook? You can score a house for under $100,000 and still have money left to fix the squeaky screen door. Numbers. The median home price is about $99,000, average rent hovers near $750, and the cost of living runs 20 to 22% below the national average. It's small-town math that makes city budgets look absurd. Catch. The steel boom days are long gone, jobs are limited, and younger folks often leave for Pittsburgh or beyond. The vibe is more quiet retirement than booming opportunity. Local quote. Weirton's got history and cheap homes, but don't expect nightlife unless you count sheets, joked one resident. Running gag. Drivers. Everyone knows everyone, so blinkers are less about signaling and more about courtesy waves. Picture this. Church bells mixing with the hum of lawnmowers, kids tossing footballs in cracked driveways, and old steel stacks looming like sentinels over the valley. It's calm, affordable, and drenched in nostalgia, like Mayberry with a rusted skyline. Living here feels like stepping back into a slower America. Up next, Michigan shows what happens when the mills fade but the grit stays. Bay City, Michigan. Bay City sits on the Saginaw Bay, where you can snag a house for under $120,000 and still have enough left over for a boat, albeit one that might only see water 3 months of the year. It's the kind of Midwest bargain that feels too good to ignore until winter arrives with a grudge. Numbers. The median home price floats around $118,000, average rent is about $850, and the cost of living runs roughly 21% below the national average. You get lake views without the lakefront price tag. Catch. Jobs rely heavily on manufacturing and healthcare. Crime rates trend above the US average, and winters can feel endless. Gray skies, ice-slick sidewalks, and heating bills that double as horror stories. Local quote. Bay City's cheap, but we pay in snow, one lifelong resident shrugged. Running gag. Drivers. Potholes here are less obstacles and more unofficial landmarks. Locals will literally give directions using them. Picture this: a summer evening with concerts by the water, the smell of fried perch drifting from a dockside shack, and neighbors gathered for fireworks. It feels idyllic until January hits and the bay turns into a frozen parking lot. Next up, Warren shows what cheap housing looks like when survival is the selling point. Warren, Michigan. Warren is Detroit's next-door neighbor where you can still buy a solid house for under $130,000 and live within reach of Motor City without paying Motor City prices. It's suburbia with muscle car DNA baked into the asphalt. Numbers. The median home price sits around $127,000. Average rent is about $950, and the cost of living runs roughly 18% below the national average. On paper, it's the affordable gateway to the Detroit Metro. Catch: crime rates sit higher than the national average, schools rank all over the board, and potholes are practically part of the landscape. Winters drag long, gray, and cold, so bundle up or learn to love shoveling. Local quote: "Warren's got every chain restaurant and every car part you'll ever need, but don't expect charm," said one local. Running gag: drivers. Here, turn signals are optional, but loud mufflers are practically required. Picture this: auto shops humming on every corner, backyard grills smoking even in December, and neighbors talking engines like it's small talk. Warren gives you affordable living with a side of grit and grease. It's practical, unpretentious, and still close enough to Detroit to borrow its chaos when you want it. Next up, Flint shows what happens when the auto industry pulls out but the houses stay cheap. Flint, Michigan. Flint is one of the cheapest housing markets in the US, where you can land a house for under $90,000, sometimes under $60,000. But the trade-offs are as obvious as they are infamous. Affordable doesn't always mean easy. Numbers. The median home price hovers around $89,000, average rent sits close to $750, and the cost of living is about 24% below the national average. If you're purely looking at the math, it's a steal. Catch: Flint's history is scarred by the water crisis, which left deep distrust in infrastructure. Violent crime runs high, schools struggle, and jobs are limited outside healthcare and education. Even today, some residents still don't trust what flows from the tap. Local quote: "Flint is cheap, but you pay in stress," one resident admitted. Running gag: drivers. The potholes here aren't avoided, they're memorized. Locals swap survival tips like it's Mario Kart. Picture this: rows of empty factories from the auto heyday, murals splashed across downtown, and a stubborn community determined to push forward. On one block, a home sells for the price of a used SUV. On the next, neighbors rally for clean water. Flint is resilient, raw, and cheap, but not for the faint of heart. Next, Toledo, Ohio shows how steel towns rewrite themselves in the bargain bin. Toledo, Ohio. Toledo is the kind of Rust Belt city where you can buy a whole house for the cost of someone else's down payment. Under $120,000 gets you a 3-bedroom and rent barely dents a paycheck. It's blue-collar affordability with a side of Lake Erie breeze. Numbers. The median home price is around $115,000, average rent comes in under $900, and the cost of living sits about 21% below the national average. For budget hunters, it's a solid deal. Catch: Toledo's economy is tied to manufacturing, which means job stability can swing like a rusty gate. Crime sits above the US average, winters are brutal, and the city fights potholes like it's a losing war. Local quote: "Toledo's cheap, gritty, and obsessed with mud hens baseball," one local laughed. Running gag: drivers. Red lights? More like suggestions. You'll see 3 cars go through after it turns. Picture this: a downtown block mixing glassy office towers with boarded-up shops, the smell of chili dogs drifting from a Mud Hens game, and lake effect winds cutting straight through your jacket. Toledo isn't glamorous, but it's resilient, proud, and cheap enough to make your mortgage feel like a punchline. Next up, Scranton proves just how low Midwest prices can really go. Scranton, Pennsylvania. Scranton isn't just a punchline from The Office, it's one of the cheapest ways to own a house in Pennsylvania. Under $150,000 gets you a starter home with mountain views, and rent is low enough to make city dwellers cry. Numbers. The median home price sits around $145,000. Average rent hovers near $900, and the cost of living runs about 15% below the national average. It's budget-friendly, with just enough city vibe to feel lively. Catch: the job market leans heavy on healthcare, logistics, and education, but opportunities can be thin. Winters are long and icy, potholes double as swimming pools, and wages don't stretch much beyond the basics. Local quote, "Scranton's cheap, but you better like snow and corner bars," one resident joked. Running gag, drivers. Hills plus winter equals bumper cars with insurance claims. Picture this, old coal town row houses lining narrow streets, church bells cutting through frosty air, and neighbors shouting across porches like it's a neighborhood meeting. On Friday nights, the whole town feels like a family reunion at the local pizza shop. Scranton's not glamorous, but it's gritty, affordable, and stubbornly proud. Next, Rochester takes affordability and throws in a Great Lake for good measure. Rochester, New York. Rochester is one of those rare New York cities where you can actually afford a house without selling a kidney. For under $170,000, you get a full-sized home, tree-lined streets, and a mortgage that looks nothing like Manhattan's rent. Numbers. The median home price runs about $165,000, average rent hovers near $1,000, and the cost of living is roughly 13% below the national average. In New York terms, that's basically free. Catch, winters are brutal. Lake effect snow dumps feet at a time. Jobs aren't as plentiful as they once were, and crime rates sit above the national average. The Kodak days are long gone, and the economy is still figuring itself out. Local quote, "Rochester's cheap, but you'll shovel until your back hates you," one resident sighed. Running gag, drivers. Snow tires aren't optional, they're survival gear. Everyone here drives like they're late for a Wegmans run. Picture this. Lilacs blooming in spring, kids sledding down icy hills in winter, and jazz floating from summer festivals downtown. The homes are big, the culture is richer than outsiders expect, and the price tags are shockingly small. For New York, it's practically a bargain bin. Next up, Erie. Pennsylvania proves lake towns can be even cheaper. Enid, Oklahoma. Enid is the kind of prairie city where you can still grab a 3-bedroom for under $140,000 and live with wide open skies as your backyard wallpaper. It's small-town Oklahoma with just enough bustle to keep you from dozing off. Numbers. The median home price hovers near $138,000. Average rent lands close to $850, and the cost of living sits about 23% below the US average. Your paycheck stretches like it's on steroids. Catch. Summers roast past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Tornado season brings sirens more often than parades, and nightlife usually means Walmart runs or high school football games. Jobs lean on agriculture, energy, and the Air Force Base. Steady but limited. Local quote, "Enid's cheap, but the wind never stops slapping you in the face," one local laughed. Running gag, drivers. Every truck is oversized, every blinker optional, and parking lots double as drag strips on Friday nights. Picture this. The smell of fried chicken drifting from small diners, grain silos towering over flat streets, and sunsets so wide they feel like a movie screen. Enid is affordable, stubbornly plain, and oddly comforting, like a faded postcard from Middle America. Next up, Youngstown shows how affordability collides with Army grit. Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown is the Rust Belt's poster child for cheap housing. You can buy a whole house here for less than a used Tesla. Under $100,000 gets you a decent 3-bedroom, and foreclosure deals sometimes drop under $50,000. Numbers. The median home price sits around $95,000. Average rent runs about $750, and the cost of living hovers 25% below the national average. On paper, it's almost too affordable to ignore. Catch. The steel industry collapse left deep scars. Jobs are limited. Population has been shrinking for decades, and crime rates swing well above the US average. Some neighborhoods are more ghost town than community. Local quote, "Youngstown's cheap, but you'll trade peace of mind for that mortgage," one resident warned. Running gag, drivers. Potholes are so massive locals nickname them. Swerving around Big Bertha is a daily ritual. Picture this, rows of brick homes with peeling paint, old steel mills rusting against the skyline, and neighbors who've seen it all but still wave from their porches. Despite the rough edges, there's grit, loyalty, and affordability that makes the math undeniable. Youngstown is proof that the American dream still exists, if you're willing to overlook the cracks in the sidewalk. Next up, Dayton, Ohio, Indiana puts college football in the middle of the bargain bin. Dayton, Ohio. Dayton is where aviation history meets Midwest affordability. For under $120,000, you can grab a full-sized house in the birthplace of the Wright brothers and still have room in the budget for a garage workshop. Numbers. The median home price is about $118,000. average rent hovers near $875, and the cost of living comes in roughly 22% below the US average. Cheap mortgages are the norm, not the exception. Catch. Dayton's economy has been through turbulence since manufacturing declined, crime rates are above average, and some neighborhoods still show scars from disinvestment. Winters bring gray skies that feel endless, and summers aren't shy about humidity. Local quote. Dayton's affordable, but you'll need patience and a snow shovel, one local said. Running gag, drivers. Yellow lights here mean floor it, and potholes double as speed bumps in disguise. Picture this, the sound of jet engines from the nearby Air Force Museum, brick homes with big porches, and neighbors grilling brats in the middle of February. Dayton feels blue-collar, stubbornly proud, and easier on the wallet than most of Ohio. It's not glamorous, but it's steady and affordable enough to make you forget about the weather. Next up, Gary, Indiana proves that college football and bargain houses can share the same block. Gary, Indiana. Gary is one of the cheapest places in America to buy a house, sometimes for the price of a new iPhone. Whole homes list under $80,000, and tax auctions can dip even lower. Once the steel capital, today Gary is affordability wrapped in rust and resilience. Numbers. The median home price hovers near $79,000, average rent sits around $800, and the cost of living is roughly 25% below the US average. On paper, it's hard to beat. Catch. Gary struggles with high crime rates, abandoned blocks, and an economy still recovering from the steel industry collapse. Jobs are limited, schools face challenges, and outsiders often see headlines before heart. Local quote. Gary's cheap, but you'll earn every dollar you save, said one longtime resident. Running gag, drivers. Roads are so cratered you start naming potholes after relatives. Picture this. Shuttered factories looming over Lake Michigan's horizon, gospel music spilling out of old churches, and neighbors mowing lawns next to boarded-up homes. It's gritty, proud, and defiantly affordable. Gary won't charm everyone, but for bargain hunters, it's proof the American dream still has an address, just with a little rust on the mailbox. Next up, Saginaw, Michigan mixes Notre Dame's spirit with housing prices that surprise. Saginaw, Michigan. Saginaw is where you can snag a house for under $100,000 and still be within reach of the Great Lakes. It's a city with history, grit, and a price tag that feels frozen in time. Numbers. The median home price sits around $97,000, average rent lands near $800, and the cost of living is roughly 24% below the US average. For first-time buyers, it's one of Michigan's cheapest front doors. Catch. Crime rates are significantly above the national average. Jobs are concentrated in healthcare, manufacturing, and education, and the city's population has shrunk over the decades. Winters hit hard, and potholes make spring driving a survival sport. Local quote. Saginaw's affordable, but lock your doors and buy a snow shovel, one resident advised. Running gag. Drivers. People dodge potholes like it's a competitive sport. You'll see whole convoys weaving across lanes in unison. Picture this. Church steeples rising above modest neighborhoods, the smell of coney dogs drifting from corner diners, and the Saginaw River glinting in the evening sun. It's cheap, a little rough around the edges, but deeply Midwestern. For buyers who value price over polish, Saginaw proves you can still live large on a small budget. Next up, Macon. Georgia, Indiana blends college town energy with Midwest affordability. Macon, Georgia. Macon is a southern bargain where you can score a full 3-bedroom for under $120,000 and still have money left for sweet tea on the porch. It's Peach State charm without the Atlanta price tags. Numbers. The median home price is around $118,000, average rent sits near $850, and the cost of living is roughly 20% below the national average. Your paycheck stretches further than in most Georgia cities. Catch. Crime rates run above the national average, jobs lean on healthcare, education, and manufacturing, and some neighborhoods show signs of disinvestment. Summers are brutally hot and humid, so SPF isn't optional. Local quote, Macon's cheap, but you better like sweatin' sweet tea, one resident laughed. Running gag. Drivers. Left turns here require both patience and prayer. Turn signals are optional, and everyone has an opinion on lane etiquette. Picture this, cherry blossoms lining the streets in spring, BBQ smoke drifting from backyard grills, and neighbors chatting from porches while kids ride bikes in the heat. Macon is slow, colorful, and affordable, a city that wears its quirks proudly. For buyers chasing southern charm on a budget, it's a home run. Next up, Buffalo proves riverside living doesn't have to cost a fortune. Buffalo, New York. Buffalo is a Great Lakes bargain where you can grab a full-sized home for under $130,000 and still be minutes from waterfront views, wings, and all the snow you can handle. It's blue-collar charm without the New York City sticker shock. Numbers. The median home price sits around $128,000, average rent hovers near $950, and the cost of living is about 17% below the national average. For buyers craving space without debt panic, Buffalo is tempting. Catch. Winters are brutal. Crime rates sit above the US average in some neighborhoods, and the economy has its ups and downs since the industrial decline. Summers are short, but the city packs them with festivals and lake breezes. Local quote. Buffalo's cheap, but you better love snow and wings, one resident joked. Running gag. Drivers. Snowplows are part of the civic charm. You learn to navigate streets like a strategic board game. Picture this. Art Deco buildings alongside Victorian row houses, the smell of beef on weck drifting from local bakeries, and neighbors clearing sidewalks as if it's a sport. Buffalo is gritty, proud, and surprisingly affordable. For anyone seeking northern charm without the price tag, it's a winter-ready steal. Next, Cleveland shows how small New York cities keep it cheap. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland is a Rust Belt city where a full-sized house can cost less than a studio in Columbus. For under $130,000, you get space, old-school charm, and a city that refuses to hide its blue-collar roots. Numbers. The median home price sits around $128,000. Average rent lands near $900, and the cost of living is roughly 18% below the national average. Affordability is the name of the game. Catch. Crime rates run above the national average in certain neighborhoods. Winters dump snow like it's their job, and the job market is tied heavily to healthcare, education, and manufacturing. Some blocks still wear their industrial past on every corner. Local quote. Cleveland's cheap, but you'll shovel more than your driveway, one resident quipped. Running gag. Drivers. Turn signals are optional, but honking is mandatory, especially during lake-effect snowstorms. Picture this. Vintage brick homes lining streets with snow-covered yards, the smell of Polish sausages drifting from corner diners, and neighbors chatting through frosted windows. Sports bars buzz even on slow nights, and the city hums with grit and character. Cleveland is affordable, resilient, and unapologetically Midwestern, a place where cheap homes don't mean cheap living. Next, Rockford proves affordability stretches along the Maumee River. Rockford, Illinois. Rockford is one of those Midwest cities where a full 3-bedroom can run under $120,000, letting you live comfortably without mortgaging your future. Its industrial roots meet suburban practicality, with plenty of parks to remind you life isn't just factories. Numbers. The median home price sits around $118,000, average rent hovers near $850, and the cost of living is roughly 22% below the national average. Your paycheck stretches further than in much of Illinois. Catch. Crime is above the national average in certain neighborhoods. Job growth is slow, and winters hit hard with snow and gray skies that refuse to quit. Some streets still wear their manufacturing-era scars. Local quote, Rockford's cheap, but keep your wits and snow shovel handy, one local joked. Running gag. Drivers. Stoplights exist mostly as suggestions, and potholes double as unofficial landmarks. Picture this. Sprawling brick homes, BBQ smoke drifting from backyard grills, kids biking along quiet streets, and neighbors waving from porches. Festivals and riverfront walks keep things lively, but affordability is the real headline. Rockford is stubborn, practical, and unapologetically Midwest. It's proof you can still live large without a Chicago-sized mortgage. Next up, Muskegon shows lakefront living doesn't have to cost a fortune. Muskegon, Michigan. Muskegon sits on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, where a house under $140,000 gets you space, lake breezes, and enough room for a boat, or two. Affordable lakeside living? It's real here, if you're willing to embrace Midwestern winters. Numbers. The median home price is around $138,000. Average rent hovers near $900, and the cost of living runs roughly 20% below the national average. For anyone chasing waterfront vibes without the city tax, it's a steal. Catch. Crime rates are above average, jobs are mostly tied to manufacturing and healthcare, and the winters can be brutal, with snow that makes even locals question their sanity. Summers are short but beautiful. Local quote, Muskegon's cheap, but winter is a full-time hobby, one resident laughed. Running gag. Drivers. People treat snow-covered streets like obstacle courses. Fender benders are basically part of the landscape. Picture this: sandy beaches on Lake Michigan, children flying kites at the park, boats rocking gently in the harbor, and neighbors waving from porches while BBQ smoke drifts across quiet streets. Muskegon is affordable, scenic, and stubbornly Midwestern. For those willing to trade warmth for lake views, it's a bargain that bites in winter but delights the rest of the year. Next, South Bend proves Collegetown Energy can meet bargain housing. South Bend, Indiana. South Bend is where Collegetown Energy collides with Midwest affordability. Under $130,000 lands you a full 3-bedroom, and you're never far from the Notre Dame campus, football culture, or downtown murals. Numbers: the median home price sits around $128,000. Average rent hovers near $900, and the cost of living is roughly 18% below the national average. Cheap mortgages meet small city perks. Catch: crime rates are above the national average in some neighborhoods. Winters dump lake-effect snow that makes your car cry, and the job market leans on education, healthcare, and manufacturing. Some areas still feel the post-industrial blues. Local quote: South Bend's cheap, but you better like football, frosted flakes mornings, and shoveling snow, one resident joked. Running gag: drivers. Left turns are adventurous, and stoplights exist mostly for decoration. Picture this: brick homes with ivy-covered fences, college flags waving in front yards, students biking through snowy streets, and neighbors sipping coffee on porches. The downtown hums with small cafes and murals, while the outskirts offer quiet affordability. South Bend proves you can get culture, history, and cheap housing all in one Midwest package. Next, Peoria shows Illinois bargains that are too good to ignore. Peoria, Illinois. Peoria is classic Midwest affordability with a side of riverfront charm. A 3-bedroom home can go for under $120,000, letting you live comfortably without selling your soul to student loans or city rents. Numbers: the median home price hovers around $118,000. Average rent lands near $850, and the cost of living is about 22% below the national average. For budget-conscious buyers, it's a steal. Catch: crime rates in certain neighborhoods run above the national average. Winters can be gray and bone-chilling, and job growth is steady but not flashy, mainly healthcare, manufacturing, and education. Local quote: Peoria's cheap, but don't expect glamour. You get comfort and practicality, a resident quipped. Running gag: drivers. Stoplights exist, but locals treat them more like suggestions, and potholes double as navigational landmarks. Picture this: the Illinois River glinting in the sunset, kids biking down quiet streets, barbecue smoke drifting from backyards, and neighbors waving from porches. Downtown hums with local shops, cafes, and festivals, but affordability remains the true headline. Peoria proves that you can have space, charm, and small city perks without mortgaging your life. Next up, Canton, Ohio shows what happens when affordability meets industrial grit. Canton, Ohio. Canton is where football history meets Midwest affordability. For under $110,000, you can grab a full-sized home and still have cash left for tailgates or local diners. The city hums with small-town charm and industrial grit. Numbers: the median home price sits around $108,000. Average rent hovers near $850, and the cost of living is roughly 20% below the national average. Your paycheck stretches further than in much of Ohio. Catch: crime rates in some neighborhoods run above the national average. The job market is tied heavily to manufacturing and healthcare, and winters are long, gray, and cold. Some areas still wear their industrial past on every street corner. A local quote: Canton's cheap, but you better like high school football and snow shovels, one resident joked. Running gag: drivers. Turn signals are optional, potholes are unavoidable, and everyone has a story about dodging both at the same time. Picture this: brick homes with modest yards, the Pro Football Hall of Fame looming downtown, and neighbors chatting across porches while the smell of backyard grilling drifts through the streets. Canton is affordable, stubbornly Midwestern, and rich with character. Proof that cheap housing can come with pride and community. Next up, Kalamazoo adds Collegetown perks to Midwest bargains. Kalamazoo, Michigan. Kalamazoo is a college-town bargain where a 3-bedroom home can go for under $140,000, giving you space, charm, and a dose of Midwestern culture. Affordable living meets art, breweries, and a little academic flair. Numbers: the median home price sits around $138,000. Average rent hovers near $900, and the cost of living is roughly 20% below the national average. Your paycheck stretches, and student loans aren't the end of the story. Catch: Crime rates are above average in some neighborhoods. Winters can be icy and gray, and job opportunities outside education, healthcare, and small manufacturing are limited. Traffic is low, but potholes remain a persistent foe. Local quote, "Kalamazoo's cheap, but you better like breweries and college sports," one resident said. Running gag, drivers. Turn signals are optional, and locals have perfected the art of dodging icy patches while commuting to campus or work. Picture this. Brick homes with ivy creeping up fences, students biking through tree-lined streets, summer festivals filling downtown with music, and neighbors waving across porches. Kalamazoo blends culture, affordability, and small-town charm in a way that makes living large on a budget feel completely normal. Next up, Fort Wayne proves Northeast Indiana knows cheap housing too. Fort Wayne, Indiana. Fort Wayne is a Midwest city where affordability meets practicality. For under $130,000, you can snag a full 3-bedroom home and still have money left over for weekend adventures or a modest yard upgrade. Numbers. The median home price sits around $128,000. Average rent hovers near $900, and the cost of living is roughly 18% below the national average. Cheap mortgages and low rents make it one of Indiana's most budget-friendly cities. Catch. Crime rates are above average in some areas. Winters bring snow and gray skies, and job opportunities lean heavily on healthcare, education, and manufacturing. Downtown revitalization is slow but steady. Local quote, "Fort Wayne's cheap, practical, and surprisingly lively," one resident said. Running gag, drivers. Left turns are daring, stoplights optional, and potholes serve double duty as informal speed bumps. Picture this. Tree-lined streets with brick homes, neighbors chatting over fences, the hum of local breweries and cafes downtown, and kids riding bikes through quiet neighborhoods. Fort Wayne is practical, affordable, and Midwestern to its core. For anyone seeking low-cost living without sacrificing city amenities, it's a smart, stubbornly charming choice. Next up, Erie, Pennsylvania proves that cheap lakeside living exists outside Michigan. Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie sits on the shores of Lake Erie, where you can grab a full-sized home for under $120,000 and enjoy waterfront views without the big city price tag. It's small-town charm with Great Lakes perks. Numbers. The median home price hovers around $118,000, average rent sits near $900, and the cost of living is about 21% below the national average. Affordable lakeside living is real here. Catch. Crime rates are above average in some neighborhoods, jobs mainly revolve around manufacturing, healthcare, and education, and winters hit hard with lake-effect snow that can bury streets for days. Summers are short but packed with festivals and outdoor activities. Local quote, "Erie's cheap, but snow and humidity aren't optional," one resident laughed. Running gag, drivers. Ice on roads makes morning commutes feel like obstacle courses, and potholes are practically civic landmarks. Picture this. Sunsets over the lake, boats rocking in the harbor, children flying kites on the beach, and neighbors chatting across yards while BBQ smoke drifts through streets. Erie is scenic, stubbornly affordable, and full of Midwestern grit. For buyers chasing lakeside living without breaking the bank, it's a surprisingly attainable dream. Next, Pueblo proves northern lake cities can be cheap and charming too. Pueblo, Colorado. Pueblo is a city where a full-sized home costs less than a used car, yet the streets hum with history, southwestern culture, and steel-town grit. The median home price sits around $165,000. Average rent for a 2-bedroom hovers near $850, and the cost of living runs below the national average. Affordable housing meets sunny skies, friendly neighborhoods, and a surprising amount of character. Catch. Summer scorch, brownouts happen occasionally, and streets weave between historic brick buildings and aging steel structures. Jobs lean on manufacturing, healthcare, and education, but the vibe is more cultural than corporate. Local quote, "Pueblo's cheap, colorful, and full of stories," a resident said. Running gag, drivers. Turn signals exist mostly as suggestions, and a downtown parade or festival can shut streets with zero notice. Picture this. Green chile wafting from kitchens, marching bands rehearsing for a local parade, murals telling the city's stories, and people strolling riverside trails. Pueblo isn't just affordable, it's vibrant, authentic, and stubbornly alive. For anyone chasing cheap housing with culture and character, it's a place where the American dream feels tangible without the big city price tag. Canton, Mississippi. Canton is a town where homes can cost less than a new laptop, yet the streets hum with southern charm, historic architecture, and small-town energy. The median home price sits around $95,000. Average rent for a two-bedroom hovers near $650, and the cost of living runs well below the national average. Affordable housing meets tree-lined streets, local shops, and a pace that feels slower but richer. Catch: summers are sticky, occasional power outages happen, and the job market leans heavily on manufacturing, healthcare, and small local businesses. Some streets carry the quiet persistence of small-town Mississippi life. Local quote: "Canton's cheap, but warm and welcoming," one resident said. Running gag: drivers. Stop signs are optional, and streets double as playgrounds. Expect to dodge kids on bikes and cars alike. Picture this: antebellum homes lining shaded streets, the smell of southern cooking drifting from porches, children laughing as they play, and neighbors waving as you pass. Canton isn't just affordable, it's inviting, full of character, and steeped in history. For buyers chasing budget-friendly living with charm, it's a hidden southern gem where the old and new coexist effortlessly.